I am so excited for this Advent Christmas Eve weeks to come because this year we are opening up the gift of words that Jack Kurtz has left Bush Hill Presbyterian Church. Over the next 5 worship services, we are going to share with you a story sermon series that Jack wrote for Bush Hill in 1993. And in that way, Jack will be a messenger to us as he writes a story about an aging suburban church. Very interesting. About an aging suburban church where one of the lead characters takes the role on of Zechariah. We just heard that scripture reading, and now we're going to listen for the ways in which people act as messengers of God with and for each other. And so, without further ado, we have Angel Acres, Chapter 1, Burnt Out Light Bulbs by Jack Kurtz.
The subdivision of Angel Acres sits on the south edge of Bradenton, Pennsylvania, a planned community built shortly after the Second World War. Its 814 small rectangular homes were once proudly identical in a decade when conformity was considered a desirable, a comforting thing. There were variations on the theme. Some picture windows were on the left, some on the right, some tiny front stoops sheltered by peaked roofs, some flat. But originally, even these individualistic details added to the sense of predictability since the variations occurred in regular rhythms. Right window peaked roofs, left window peaked roofs, right window flat roofs, left window flat roofs. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Over the decades, there have been violations of the original plan, iconoclastic color selection when the time to repaint arrived, evidence of a reasonably successful aluminum siding salesman, variation in shrubbery selection, occasional transformation of one-car garages into family rooms, and dry rot. Angel Acres isn't a slum yet, but it is old. And the original lack of creativity and cost-conscious design and construction techniques assure that as long as it exists, Angel Acres will never be quaint, only old.
The name does not have a heavenly origin. It was named after Angle Street. Someone misread the street name on the map, and by the time the error was discovered, all the promotional brochures were already printed.
The 1, 2, 3, 4 rhythm of Angel Acres is not absolute. It is broken 4 times, rhythmically. At each corner of the rectangular plot are exceptions. On 2 corners, planned shopping areas. On a third, a park. And on a fourth, a planned church. Actually, a planned church building. Just as the homes had been built on the assumption that families would eventually buy them, the church had been built prior to the existence of a congregation as part of the master plan. The houses were sold more rapidly than the church.
The church building is a squashed colonial. The main body of the church is a 3-story, virtually featureless, concrete block cube to which is attached to a traditional white pillared and spired front. Unless one stands directly in front of the structure, the total impression is as bad as it sounds.
On November 27, the Saturday before the first Sunday in Advent, Sarah Tiergarten is standing at the foot of the front steps. For all of the 45 years that she had been a member of Angel Acres Community Church, She has, sometimes consciously and sometimes unconsciously, attempted to approach it from the front. Looking at the church from any other angle still sets her teeth on edge.
Sarah Tiergarten is symbolic of both the Angel Acres subdivision and the Angel Acres Community Church. And as she stands at the foot of the steps, she is very conscious of this. She feels old and wrinkled and tired.
She and her husband, Max, had been newlyweds when they signed the contract for the third home completed in Angel Acres. Toward the middle of their residency, they could have moved, bought up into another newer suburb with newer, larger homes, but they had been comfortable in Angel Acres, and there had been the church.
Without denominational affiliation or support from district offices or other congregations, the Angel Acres Community Church had suffered through difficult birth pangs. Sarah and Max Tiergarten had been among the 36 people who had first responded to a general mailing to the residents and met in the fellowship hall one late November night. The developers had hired an out-of-work minister to come in on Sundays and preach a sermon, agreeing to pay him for the first 6 months until he could establish a new congregation and his own financial support. It soon became apparent why he was out of work, but about 2/3 of those at the first meeting had occupied the pews through December, almost lost in the sanctuary designed to hold 250.
Then on Christmas Eve, with no more effort involved than putting up a sign announcing service in front of the church, the fledgling congregation had enticed a crowd of some 150. About half the houses had been occupied by this time, and most of the residents hadn't had much time for church shopping. It was Christmas Eve. Angel Acres Community Church was there. They saw the sign. They took the path of least resistance. They had to find somewhere to go on Christmas Eve. Max had put up the sign. Sarah had bought 50 candles and placed them strategically around the church. The candles and the traditional carols were foolproof, almost drowning out the muddled sermon.
The average attendance in January was 75. It started to slide in February, but 4 months later, the contract of the original minister was not renewed. The church hired an inexperienced but enthusiastic recent seminary graduate, and the congregation ballooned to 150. Attendance on Sunday morning stabilized at around 70. Sarah and Max Tiergarten taught the children's church school. It was intergenerational before the psychological and theological value of such classes was recognized. There were 2 third graders, a 6th grader, and one mortified 11th grade boy.
Angel Acres Community Church experienced its golden age in the early 60s, due in part to Max and Sarah Tiergarten, and in part to an especially gifted minister whom Max and Sarah had found after 6 months of visiting other churches.
Membership soared to almost 500. Worship attendance almost filled the sanctuary on some Sundays. Max and Sarah presided over a youth group that averaged 20 young people, most of whom actually wanted to be there. And Angel Acres Community Church became famous for its Christmas lights. Max had started it the second Christmas after the church's beginning. He had purchased enough strings of lights to outline the front door of the church and 2 small shrubs planted at the foot of the stairs. The second year, he had spiraled lights around the 2 central pillars. In subsequent years, he had covered the other pillars and the spire that outlined the edges of the windows of the concrete block cube, which looked considerably more attractive in the dark. It had taken some 15 years and a considerable contribution from the Tiergarten bank account, but Max insisted they could and should afford it. They couldn't have children. Sarah knew Max would never adopt. At Christmas, the Tiergartens lavished on the Angel Acres Community Church the gifts they might otherwise have given a child.
So with Max and Sarah Tiergarten and the gifted minister and the fact that everyone for miles around made a pilgrimage to see the lights as a part of their Christmas tradition, and sometimes came back in January, the church had flourished for a time.
Now there were approximately 80 members, perhaps 20 at worship on Sunday mornings, listening to whatever visiting seminary student needed a few bucks, and Sarah estimated about 1/3 of the Christmas lights were burned out.
Max had died in April, a third heart attack. The burnout bulbs hadn't been replaced for 3 years previous to that. Max couldn't climb the ladder. The youngest member of the church was now in his early 50s and had little interest in the Christmas lights. The church had no money for replacement bulbs and their medical bills, and with their medical bills, neither did Max and Sarah. It hadn't been bad the first Christmas. By the second, the gaps were becoming more noticeable. It had been embarrassing last Christmas. This year, the board had voted not to turn them on at all.
Except tonight, Sarah had come to the church, flipped on the main switch, and now stood at the foot of the steps to see how bad the situation really was. With almost as much despair as she had felt at Max's death, she saw that the board had been right. The broken lines of brightness were nothing more than an advertisement of the state of the church, nighttime equivalents of the peeling paint visible during the day. They were, however, bright enough for Sarah to notice for the first time the young man standing by the bushes at the side of the church.
For 5 years before his death, Max had tried to persuade Sarah to carry a can of mace. As Angel Acres had deteriorated, she knew many of her neighbors did this. For the first time, Sarah began to wish she had listened to him.
The young man was shabbily dressed, although Sarah knew that it was impossible to know today whether this represented poverty, rebellion, or a fashion statement. The man moved toward her. She tensed, but did not run. She could no longer climb ladders, and she knew that running would do no good.
You work here?
It was not what she expected.
No, I'm a member.
You just turn on the lights?
Yes?
My dad used to go to this church.
Finally, Sarah relaxed.
Oh, what was his name?
He just went when he was a kid. Ron Fielder.
Oh, my, yes. I remember Ron. We were advisors to his youth group.
You aren't Mrs. Tiergarten?
Yes, Sarah Tiergarten. He told you about us?
Oh, hey, he talked about you and Mr. Tiergarten all the time. He said you were great. He always talked about you when he was trying to get me to go to the church.
Did he succeed?
Not very often.
We never did see Ron, your father, after he went off to college. I think we got Christmas cards for a while. What's he doing now?
Well, he's in Detroit. He designs cars. When he got married, my mom was a Lutheran, so they went there for a while, but not very often.
What are you doing here?
They got divorced a few years ago. My mom came back here to live with her folks.
I'm sorry.
Me too. Are you gonna replace the lights?
Probably not. There's nobody here to do it.
I think you ought to replace the lights. My dad told me a story. It was just before Mom and I moved here. I think he was trying to get in all the fatherly wisdom he could since I wasn't going to see him much anymore. I don't think he would have told me otherwise. It was about the lights.
Yes?
When he was about 9 years old, his folks were killed in a car wreck.
I know.
And anyhow, it shook him. I guess it would anybody. And he wound up in a foster home with these people who were real. Well, they had their own kids, and he was kind of a way to get extra money from the county.
Yeah, he told us.
He tell you he almost committed suicide?
No.
I guess it was the first Christmas Eve after his folks died, and the people he was with had all these presents under the tree for their own 2 kids, and one little present for him. And he knew it would be something like underwear or a sweater or something. Anyhow, after he came home from school, he just kind of left his books and walked out of the house and told himself he was never coming back. Except he didn't pack any clothes or anything. He just walked out. He said he probably wouldn't have done it. He was just a kid. He said he was thinking to himself where he could find a real high building he could get in, or whether it would be better to jump in the river. except he figured that would be pretty cold, and it started snowing, and he'd been walking around for a while for he didn't know long, and all of a sudden, the lights came on.
The lights on the church?
Yeah, and he said there was an angel outlined in lights out on the front.
We did that in 65.
Well, where is it?
The frame rotted. We had to take it down a few years ago.
Too bad. Anyhow, it made him think of the angel saying, "Unto you a Savior is born." I guess they taught that in school back then, and somehow it just seemed that everything could be all right. He came to church on Christmas Eve, and he started coming on Sundays, and everything was all right. Well, not everything, but he said it changed his life. He said if I had a problem, anyhow, tonight, I wish the angel was still there.
You have a problem?
Yeah.
Girl problem?
Hey, you're pretty sharp for... Yeah.
She hadn't said it in so many years, but back then,
Do you want to talk about it?
I don't think so. Not now, anyhow. Maybe later. I just wanted to see the lights. I'm sorry so many are burnt out. I'm sorry about the angel.
Me too.
I wish I was rich. Then I could buy you 1,000 light bulbs.
I have the light bulbs.
Huh? I thought you said...
There was insurance money. Max, my husband, died this spring.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So am I. I bought the light bulbs. I thought if I did that, someone in the church would put them up, but I think I knew it was foolish when I did it, but I really didn't have anyone to buy presents for, so
You got the bulbs?
yes.
So where's the ladder?
Not many of us, I think, have seen angels with wings who flutter into our presence with news that God has to share with us. But all of us are targeted for messages, no doubt. In a consumer culture like we live in, we are always targeted. And God targets us too, with messages to share. And God uses ordinary people like you and me with skin and blood and bones to tell the message of God to other people. Just as Sarah was surprised by an unknown young person, so we too have ears to hear a message that God has for us. And today, the message for Bush Hill Presbyterian Church is, we're never too old to be a new creation. In fact, the place in which we live is never too old to be a new creation and to hear a message from God through someone new in our lives, through a stranger who, in a few weeks, a few months' time, could be one of our closest friends. So I invite you this day to keep your ears opened and attuned to the messages that God is sending you. And you'll know that it's God's message because it will serve not just you, but the people around you. We are about to hear Chapter 2 from Angel Acres, a sermon story series written by our former pastor, Jack Kurtz. Jack wrote this sermon story as a gift to Bush Hill Presbyterian Church in 1993, and I'm going to suggest that he's with us again in 2020, coming to us still as a messenger with poignant words for us to consider. This week, the name of the chapter is, When is the Prize Too Big? Jack wrote this so that we might think about how angels visit us still today with messages from God about our lives and the choices we make in living them. So without any further words from me, Angel Acres by Jack Kurtz, Chapter 2, When is the prize too big?
The story takes place in a decaying suburban subdivision called Angel Acres, with a dying church and an elderly member of that church named Sarah Tiergarten, who has a final desire in life to replace all of the hundreds of light bulbs that are burnt out, which used to outline the church at Christmas time, and Art Fielder, a young man whose father once belonged to the church and who had promised Sarah he will replace the bulbs. Now it's time to meet another character.
Miriam Cassidy had been born with a congenital hip defect. It certainly wasn't life-threatening. It was largely correctable. There were, however, significant problems. It took 6 operations to do the correcting spread over Miriam's life, from the time she was 1 to the time she was 7. After the 4th operation, Miriam's father left. He was tired of worrying about paying the bills, which weren't covered by the insurance. He was disappointed that he had a little girl he couldn't bounce on his knee because of her latest cast, and he was frustrated with a wife who spent most of her time in hospital rooms and didn't take care of him.
By the time the 6th cast came off, Miriam's mother was a full-blown alcoholic. Throughout the rest of her life, she would manage only temporary sobriety and hold down occasional jobs. Welfare took care of the periods of unemployment. Mostly, Miriam took care of herself.
And Miriam limped, just a little limp. No crutches, no cane, no braces. The operations had been as successful as possible or expected, but there was a residual limp, just enough to be noticed by the other children when Miriam finally entered 3rd grade.
When Miriam was mainlined back into public school classes, she was not behind in her schoolwork. She had eagerly digested everything her special home teacher had offered her and asked for more. Over a 2-year period, the teacher had become her substitute mother. Since her real mother was largely unavailable, asking only to be left alone with her soap operas and her glass, Miriam focused her life on gaining the approval of her teacher, something she did with ease. Miriam was obviously a genius. When the time came for Miriam to return to a regular classroom, she was at least 3 years ahead of her peers. With laudable insight, the principal refused to advance her 3 grades, but agreed to place her 1 grade ahead of her age.
The tiny, limping figure, intellectually advanced and socially stunted, was an immediate magnet for the childish cruelty of her classmates. As if fate had not already seemed to single out Miriam Cassidy as a testing ground for its Slings and Arrows research division, the latest craze among her classmates was watching reruns on a local independent television station of ancient episodes of Hopalong Cassidy. Her last name assured her destruction.
Maybe she could have shrugged it off and the children would have eventually found other targets if it hadn't been that Miriam had expected so much. Home for Miriam had become a place of imprisonment, where the silence was broken only occasionally by the slurred whines of her mother. Her homebound teacher represented the only significant hope in her life, a hope which the child logically expanded to include the schoolrooms which were denied her. The day of her entrance into the normalcy of public school grew in her private theology to approximately the status of entrance into paradise. Her ultimate arrival in the classroom became the functioning hope of her gospel, and then heaven turned out to be hell.
She adjusted. The child who had so far survived 6 operations and a dysfunctional parent survived the thoughtless taunts of other children. Miriam learned the art of disappearing.
She sat toward the back of classrooms if she had a choice, never spoke, hid behind corners at recess. The children largely forgot her. The television station replaced Hopalong Cassidy reruns with Zorro reruns. Miriam became part of the furniture, an uninteresting part of that.
She did not turn off her mind. She could no more have done this than she could have stopped breathing. She learned easily. She integrated what she learned, and she produced work that continued to amaze her teachers. The grade cards came home solid with A's, uncommented on by her mother, who was equally unresponsive to the suggestions of conferences with a progression of teachers concerning Miriam's lack of social contacts.
Each year, the teachers would attempt to draw Miriam out. Miriam, in response, was always scrupulously polite, but the wall she had erected was impenetrable, and most of the teachers, possibly the wisest, after meeting or failing to meet with Miriam's mother, decided to leave well enough alone. Somehow they sensed that Miriam had created for herself the best world available to her.
By the time she reached high school, Miriam had a new dream. Her original homebound teacher had stayed in touch, both with Miriam and some of her subsequent teachers. She had given Miriam a vision of college, a place where Miriam and her shining mind belonged, a place where she was destined to be.
By the beginning of her junior year, Miriam and her mentor had settled on a literature major and had begun the scholarship search. The teacher assured Miriam there would be no problem. Her academic record and her poverty were an unbeatable combination. Then in January of her junior year, things changed.
I had 4 fouls. If I hadn't had 4 fouls, I wouldn't have been sitting on the bench, and I probably wouldn't even have noticed her. The thing is, she was sitting all by herself, way at the top of the bleachers. If she'd been sitting in the middle of some bunch of other people, I probably would have never seen her.
Art Fielder had moved with his mother to Angel Acres in September following his parents' divorce. Basketball practice had begun in early October, and Art had been amazed to discover that his skills, which had barely gotten him on the varsity in his previous high school, enabled him to star for the much smaller, much less talented Central High School team. The Central High School Civic Cats had a 5-7 record, not particularly impressive, unless one knew that the team had won only a single game throughout the previous season.
Hey!
She didn't turn, and he noticed her limp for the first time as she walked away from him down the hall. It wasn't much. He assumed she'd sprained her ankle.
Hey!
Only when he caught up with her did she acknowledge his presence, and then only by glancing at him and quickly looking away.
I'm Art Fielder.
Miriam took a grateful and abrupt right turn into the door of her classroom, and Art ran into a water fountain.
She looked scared to death. Made me feel like I was the Gestapo coming after Anne Frank. I would have just given up, but she was gorgeous. Hey, yeah, I know, it's supposed to be what's inside a person, but it's darn hard to tell what's inside a person from across the gym floor.
I was always the last one out of class. It was, I don't know, just something that made me feel a little safer. Anyhow, when I looked up, I could see him standing outside the door, and he was looking at me. I pretended to mess around with my backpack until it was almost time for the bell to ring, and he had to leave. I was late for my next class, and it was hard walking in late because I'd never done that before, and everybody looked at me.
She told me later, a lot later, about sexual harassment, and I guess I was guilty. I waited for her after classes. She said that I made her late for 4 classes that day. I finally figured out what she was doing, and I hid to the side of the door where she couldn't see me. Look, the way I figure it, you're going out with some guy whose father's in the mafia, and you really like me, but, you know, if he finds out I'm coming on to you, then his father will put a contract on me, so you're just ignoring me to keep me from— Oh! Stupid place to put a water fountain!
He was waiting for me in the front of the school. I went out the back way. Would you believe he'd staked out the back entrance and had a friend watch for me? He caught up with me about a block from the school.
She saw me, and she started to walk real fast and limp more when she did, and so help me, I didn't think anything about it. You know these ads that try to tell women that they'll have men groveling at their feet if they put on fake fingernails or choose the right kind of eyeliner? Well, I've known a lot of guys, and we talk about girls a lot, and what we like, and I've never run into a fingernail man or somebody with a thing for eyeliner. What I mean is that the limp was like that. You know, who cares? Julia Roberts with one pimple is still Julia Roberts.
What do you want?
I just wanted to say hi.
Hi?
You got anybody you're going with? I mean, anybody regular? She looked at me like I had just asked her if she'd ever had visits from flying saucers. Anyhow, I just wanted to know if maybe you'd like to go to a movie Saturday night?
Have you ever seen Carrie?
The one about the girl who sets fire to the school just by thinking about it?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw it. A couple of times. A long time ago on television, but if it's on somewhere and you want to see it, that's fine.
He didn't understand. In the movie, a bunch of girls set up this real weird, unpopular girl with telekinetic powers with a date for a big dance. And fix it so she crowned queen of the dance. And then they poured pig's blood on her. That's all I could think of. He was the star of the basketball team, and he was asking me for a date? What was the trick? I don't know why I said I'd go. I met him at the movie theater. I didn't want him to meet my mom. I guess she wasn't as bad as Carrie's.
A couple of the other guys on the team told me about her before we went out. They told me that they didn't know anything about her. She had never said anything and didn't have any friends, and I told them that was crazy. A girl that looked like that, and when I said it, it was sort of like they'd realized she existed for the first time, and hey, they guessed I was right. She wasn't bad looking. A long time later, Miriam told me about learning how to disappear. I guess she did it real well. She does a lot of things real well. Anyhow, they just said that she was real quiet, never said anything.
That first date, I was quiet. Art did all the talking. He held my hand in the movie, and then when he took me home, I was actually shaking when we got to the house. He took me by the shoulders and he kissed me, but just a little, real gently, and he left. I thought that would be it, but it wasn't.
The third time we went out, the dam broke. She got me to this foreign film, people standing around looking at each other and talking a lot, and on the way home, well, I just couldn't shut her up. She kept talking about what it all meant, and after a while I actually started to see her point, and she was right, and we went to a lot of films like that, and I actually really got to like them. Of course, I got her, so she's sort of like Sylvester Stallone, too.
I never talked to anybody. My home teacher some, but she wasn't around that much after I went back to school. It was like I'd been storing up everything I wanted to say all those years, and finally there was someone who'd listen. Not just somebody who would listen, somebody who cared about what I wanted to say. Somebody I cared about what they thought of what I said. My English teacher would say that's poor syntax, but you get what I mean. Anyway, in April, I was elected junior princess at the senior prom. Nobody poured anything on me, not until last week.
The front door of the church was open. Some of the lights were on in the sanctuary, but not many, and she couldn't see anyone.
Mrs. Tiergarten?
Yes. Miriam jumped and swiveled awkwardly toward the direction of the voice. The older woman had been standing in an alcove to the right of the door.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you.
I didn't see you. I think empty churches are spooky.
I think maybe they're supposed to be.
I'm Miriam Cassidy, Art's girlfriend. He sent me to tell you he's going to be late. They ran into some problems on a job they had to finish up.
Thank you. I'm starting to feel guilty about all the time this is taking. I don't think Art knew what he was getting into when he agreed to replace the bulbs. He says it would be easy if we had a cherry picker or even a rolling scaffolding. I'm not sure I know what either of those things are, but he has to keep moving the ladder. I don't want him to spend so much time over here that he loses his job, and I suppose I'm taking him away from you.
No, don't feel bad about it. He wants to do it. I think it's sort of a challenge now to get all the bulbs replaced by Christmas Eve, and I think maybe he's made a bargain with God. If he replaces all the bulbs, then God will give him what he wants.
Oh, what does he want?
Me. How much has he told you about us?
Quite a bit. And I must say, you seem to be everything he's told me you are, except you're missing your halo.
Yeah. Did he tell you about last week?
No, I don't think so.
Art says you used to work with senior highs, you and your husband, that his dad was in your group. You want to do some counseling?
I don't counsel. I listen.
Yeah, I guess that's what everyone does around me anymore. You wouldn't believe what I used to be like. Well, anyhow, last week they called me out of class and called me into the office. I swear, I didn't have any idea what it was.
Miss Cassidy, I'm Sean Harrison. I'm with the admissions office at Harvard. Dr. Tremaine says we can use this office in here. Normally we'd have sent you a letter, but I think you'll see. Well, first things first. You've been awarded the Cohen Scholarship that you applied for. As I'm sure that you know, this will provide 4 years full tuition, room and board, and a small stipend for expenses. I'm also sure you know that your SATs would have gotten you into most schools in the country. We were more than a little concerned about your lack of extracurricular activities, but you seem to have done somewhat better the last half of your junior year.
A lot better.
Well, yes, a lot better. That was not, however, the deciding factor. It was your stories.
My stories?
Yes, the stories that you submitted shortly after your scholarship application.
I didn't submit any short stories. Miss Wallace did it. My home teacher. I told her she couldn't, but she must have copied them and done it anyhow. Mr. Harrison, I'm so embarrassed. I know they're not any good. That's why I wanted to go to Harvard, to learn how to really write. But I got the scholarship. I won, even with the stories.
Because of the stories. Miss Cassidy, do you know of Renata Santini?
Of course, I've read all her books.
And now she has read your short stories. She is extremely interested in working with you on them, although she says they need very little work. She's more interested in working with you on acquiring an agent to market your work. She tells us you are quite phenomenal. I want to be very honest with you. We believe that if you have made the application to other schools and submitted your stories, this will not be the only scholarship that you will receive. Oh, but we do want you at Harvard. We are offering you the Cohen Grant, but we are offering something none of these other schools can offer, which is Renata Santini and all of her contacts.
I don't know.
We are in competition for you then.
Yes.
I'm not surprised. But I do have to tell you this. We do need to hear an answer from you by January 15th. The other applicants are also waiting.
That's wonderful.
Is it?
Of course it...
Right, Miss Tiergarten. Everything good in my life has come from Art. We're going to be married after I graduate from here in July. Art's apprenticed to his uncle. He's an electrician. I'm trying to talk him into taking night school classes. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But he's darn well not going to Harvard. All my life, I dreamed about being normal, about going to school like normal kids, about having friends like normal kids, about having dates like normal teenagers. And all of a sudden, like a miracle, Art gave me all of those things.
Now you're normal, and somebody's giving you the chance of being special.
Yes, and I don't know whether I can be. I've only had about a year of fitting in at Central High. Now I'm supposed to fit into Harvard? And what do I have to give up? What's so great about being special? I never really told Mr. Harrison why I wanted to wait to accept the scholarship. How do you tell somebody from Harvard that they're in competition with Turtle Creek Community College?
I love this cliffhanger. How do you tell someone from Harvard that they're in competition with Turtle Creek Community College? It's interesting to consider that Miriam is another name for Mary. And today we think about Mary as a disciple of Jesus, really. It's the angel Gabriel who comes to her and tells her, you have been chosen by God to do something very, very special. And if she had said no, we wouldn't be here today. She had to say, yes, let it be with me according to your word. Yes, I'll do it. God has such a request of each of us. Each one of us, in God's eyes, is very special. And each one of us has a calling. Each one of us has something that God has created us to do for the world. Each one of us has a mission. But will we recognize it? And will we say yes? Oftentimes, Jack says it this way. Many of us show up on Sunday mornings looking for a little hope and a little comfort and a little guidance as to how to live an ordinary, happy life. And God gives us this. Our call to worship this morning was from the prophet Isaiah. Comfort, comfort ye my people. God does want us to be comforted, but not necessarily comfortable as our world teaches us to aspire to, because sometimes our quest to be comfortable comes at the expense of some of the other human beings that God has created, and this would not fit into God's vision for the kingdom of God. We're not created to be comfortable at somebody else's expense. We're created to do something for someone else. Jack goes on to say, if I preach honest biblical sermons, there's always a second part to what God offers. Now I have something for you to do, something special. And it won't always be easy. But if we don't hear this call to be special, then we're only getting half of the point of Christmas. And of course, we're not here to just get half of the story. And that's why we also hear today from Simeon, who says to Mary that her heart is going to be pierced. So Gabriel at the very beginning, says to Mary, "You are special." And not long after Mary gives birth to Jesus, Simeon says to her, "And it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard." Let's think about hard for a minute. One of our members, Stephanie, had a really good posting on her Facebook page. It goes like this: marriage is hard. Divorce is hard. Choose your hard. Obesity is hard. Being fit is hard. Choose your hard. Being in debt is hard. Being financially disciplined is hard. Choose your hard. Communication is hard. Not communicating is hard. Choose your hard. Life will never be easy. It will always be hard, but we can choose our hard. Choose wisely. So Mary chose hard, and Mary's choice had a cost. But it was never too hard. And our choice also to live into that mission, which is ours, that calling, which is ours. And every one of us has a calling. That calling is not too hard because we never do it alone. God never asks us to do any of this alone, but together in community with others. So as God has called you to be special and reminds you this Christmas Advent season, as Christmas comes, that you are special, there's also a reminder that it will be hard, but it will never be too hard, and you will never be alone, because we have each other and God with us and among us and for us. And let all God's people say, Amen. On this third Sunday of Advent, the real sermon this week is the music that Dawn and the choir and our instrumentalists have put together for us. And so today's chapter 3 is shorter than the other chapters. So now, on to Angel Acres by Jack Kurtz, Chapter 3, Spear Carrier.
Okay, now I have to be real careful about what I say here or I'm gonna look bad. See, until I asked her out, Miriam was nobody. Okay, I'm in trouble already. Nobody is nobody. Everybody counts. But her mom was a wino and Miriam was all messed up in her head because of that little limp, and she didn't have any friends and she sure had never gone on a date. So I started going with her, and I'm the star of the basketball team, and she winds up junior princess at last year's prom. Well, I'm a year ahead of her, so I graduated last spring. Barely. And we're about to get married after she graduates. Now, 2 weeks ago, here comes this guy from Yale. Harvard. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it was Harvard. Anyhow, one of those colleges that's supposed to be so great, even though they almost always get wiped out in the first round of the NCAA. See, Miriam writes stories, and they're supposed to be good. So my fiance writes stories, and I don't even read. No, I don't mean I'm illiterate or anything. I read Sports Illustrated, and I read some science fiction. Used to be into some Dungeons and Dragons, so I read some of the swords and sorcery stuff, but that's about it. Anyhow, she gave me some of her stories to read, and I tried to be nice about them. You could tell how smart she was because of some of the words that she used, but they weren't very good. Nothing happens in them. Just really depressing people doing nothing and having depressing things happen to them. And they don't have endings. Nobody wins and nobody loses, at least she doesn't tell you. They just go on living. What kind of story is that? So she says to me they're gonna give her this big scholarship, mostly because of her stories. Do I believe this? Maybe. I mean, I know there are all kinds of people writing stuff out there that I wouldn't use to paper train the dog, and some people say it's good and it wins prizes and stuff, but still, I gotta wonder. See, after I started going with Miriam, everybody else all of a sudden just started noticing her. I mean, she is a fox, and since I graduated and I'm not in school anymore, I just know some of the guys have been hitting on her. So what am I supposed to think? Is it the college deal, or does she maybe figure she can do better? And even if she sticks with me, well, what then? I'm apprenticed to my uncle. He's an electrician. For the first 4 months, about all I did was carry his stuff. Miriam made me go to an opera once. First one she'd ever seen live, but she used to watch them on television and listen on the radio, and she said sometimes the people who sing in the chorus who aren't good enough to get any solos are called spear carriers. Anyhow, is that what I'd be? Just somebody standing off to the side of the stage doing backup vocals for her, carrying her typewriter? Then she gave me my Christmas present. She said I couldn't open it, but I did. It was a book. A novel, I guess you could call it, because it was long. She'd written it, 700 pages. I used to panic when the teacher said a report had to be at least 2 pages long. Anyhow, she said it was the first novel that she'd ever written. I took it home, and I was going to read the whole thing, and I figured I'd be really bored and depressed after 700 pages, but she'd written it, so I had to read it. And hey, it was great. It was swords and sorcery, but it was better than anything that I've ever read. Somehow the people were more real, and the stuff that happened to them was more interesting, and all the words just seemed right. Of course, there's a hero and this girl in trouble, and about halfway through it, I realized it's about us, me and Miriam. All the stuff in it is kind of like stuff that had happened to us. Not exactly, it's more exciting and everything, but it's sort of like what happened to us. And I say to myself, she's got to love me. Anybody who'd write 700 pages. Of course, it was like her other stuff in one way, it just sort of ends. You still don't know what's gonna happen.
Today we heard a lot from Art. In Chapter 3, Spear Carrier, he has a lot to say about how Miriam started out as a nobody. Not that anybody is a nobody, but in other people's eyes, she was a nobody. About him as the star of the basketball team, about how he noticed her and really fell for her and pursued her and started going out with her and engaged her in a relationship. And it turns out that this relationship breathed life into Miriam, and she came out of herself, and she went from being nobody in other people's eyes to somebody. So his love and his attention made a difference. It's not just Art that noticed Miriam. You might want to remember that Mrs. Wallace also remembered Miriam and noticed Miriam. Mrs. Wallace, her home teacher, and Mrs. Wallace was so impressed with Miriam's writing that, well, she applied on Miriam's behalf for Miriam to go to Harvard University to be enrolled as a student. And it turns out that Miriam gets in. She is offered a place. To her great surprise, she is accepted into Harvard University, and they even come to her to court her because they really want her to attend Harvard University. And Miriam is hugely surprised. She doesn't get it, I guess, that her writing is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. But Mrs. Wallace knew it, and she made sure that there was a way made forward for Miriam. Well, this ordinary girl is someone special, and Harvard University recognizes it, and their offer for her to attend as a student way far away in Boston University really messes with Art and Miriam's plan for them to marry as soon as Miriam graduates from high school. It messes with their plans, not just for a day or for a month, but for a lifetime. Well, Art comes to know what an amazing author Miriam is because of a Christmas present that Miriam gives to him. She gives him a 700-page novel, which when he received it, thought it could be not one of the best Christmas presents that he would have ever received, but he found as he read it that the people were more real than anybody he knew in life, and that the events that happened in that book were more vivid than anything he could have imagined. And so he knows that Miriam's writing is really good. He knows that she loves him, apprentice electrician that he is, and he loves her too. And they continue to be very excited about getting married as soon as she graduates from high school. But today he wonders. He wonders if he wants to play that part in the opera. Does he want to be a spear carrier for somebody else who's great? Does he want to back up the heroine of the story? Does he want to play a bit part in life? And that's what Joseph is to Mary, isn't it? He plays a bit part. Joseph in the gospel story, according to Matthew, is that strong, silent type. The guy that powers through with a steely, silent presence. And he doesn't say anything. He's not even visited and spoken to directly by an angel. The angels don't come to him except in his dream. And one comes. Well, Joseph, it's stated early on, is a righteous man. And what do we know about a righteous person? A righteous person knows the laws and obeys the laws. So before Joseph went to sleep, he was deciding that a righteous man would separate from this woman who is pregnant with a child that is not his. And he had two choices. He could either announce to the village that Mary was pregnant, where she would come to a place where the whole village could stone her for this terrible pregnancy that was not Joseph's, or he could dismiss her quietly, have her go away, and she could deliver the child somewhere else, but it would not be with the same amount of shame. That's what a righteous Jewish man would do, either have her stoned or have her dismissed. But he would not take part anymore in this relationship. And then he goes to sleep. And then in his sleep, the angel of the Lord comes to him and says, "Take Mary as your wife. It's okay." Mary is pregnant because of God. The Holy Spirit has come to Mary and made her pregnant. God is the father of this child. And you need to stay with Mary. And when she gives birth to this son, you, Joseph, you will name this child Jesus. You will name him Jesus, which means God with us. And you'll notice, if you read this text closely, that, let's say it out loud, Matthew wants to be very clear that Mary and Joseph never have sex. So never, ever, for a minute, wonder if it really might be Joseph's child. Let's think about this. This story is really about the paternity of God. God is the father in the baby's womb. God is the big daddy. There's room in the womb. I had to say that. Matthew wants to make sure that we all know who the real father is, and the real father is God. And God knows that the ministry and mission of Jesus is not going to take hold when Jesus is perceived to be illegitimate. In fact, he might not even come to term if the village decided to stone Mary. And God wants the ministry and mission to take hold. He wants people to know Jesus and follow Jesus. So God needs Joseph in order for Jesus to be given a chance to be born among mortals, a chance to be accepted in a family, a chance to have a standing in society, the chance for possibility to be received. Now, the birth of Jesus Christ doesn't start here. All right, we've got to think about Christianity a little bit. It seems like this is the start of the Christian story because this is where Jesus is born. But remember, the Christian story starts at the end. The Christian story actually starts with Paul. Oh, yeah, Paul, who traveled far and wide, who wrote all those letters, who himself was blinded by the Spirit of Christ, and he received his sight, and he could not stop talking about who Jesus is. He was so compelled by the resurrected Jesus, the Christ, that he couldn't help but start new Christian communities around the world because he knew that God had a plan for the whole world to be resurrected, which is where Christianity starts. Jesus had to die. To die, Jesus was tortured and executed. To be tortured and executed, Jesus had to live a life that was so challenging, both to the Roman Empire that was occupying his home country and the Jewish authorities that were in cahoots with the Roman Empire that they wanted to kill him. To live such a life, Jesus had to be extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. And to be extraordinary, Jesus had to at once be the Son of God and the Son of Man, or the Son of the human one. And to be the Son of Man, he had to be born of the woman Mary. And to be the Son of God, well, only God could father Jesus. So this birth story in Matthew is as much about making sure that you and I know that God is the father of the baby in the story. And don't you forget that. This father has plans for his son, big plans for his son to transform the people around him. In fact, God has cosmic plans to transform the whole world and all the nations of it. It's just that you and I usually don't get past you and I being transformed. But it's the whole world, all of creation, that God wants to transform when he becomes the father of this child, Jesus. So while God with us starts out in the womb of a poor woman, God the Father has plans for the whole world. And when he enters the world, he is bringing salvation through faith for everyone. It's the beginning of a new creation with this baby, with this man, with this martyr, with this resurrected Savior, with the ruler of us all. It will take the faith of Joseph to believe this unbelievable story when the angel of the Lord tells him about it in a dream. It will take the faith of Mary to believe that with God, nothing is impossible. Even if the life and death of Jesus pierces her soul. It will take the faith of Jesus to climb up that cruel hill called Calvary and suffer the torture of execution on a cross. That torturous death meant to absorb the violence we human beings love to inflict on one another, rather to absorb the violence and offer us forgiveness instead of revenge, as a way of dealing with people who hurt us. And it will take the faith of Paul to go out and tell the world of all that he knows of this risen Christ. And it will take the faith of you and I telling this story of Jesus, not letting it be a sweet, saccharine story only about a baby who was born in a stable, but a story that is meant to save the whole world because of salvation offered through faith and the way that we live into it and the way our actions write the story and the way that we pass it on to the next generation. With God, all things are possible. And we have faith in this. And let all God's people say, Amen. We are in the middle of a story written by Jack Kurtz, the former pastor of Bush Hill Presbyterian Church. It's an allegory of sorts on the different angels that are part of the Christmas story. Angel means messenger, and God does indeed still send messages to us today, mostly through other people. No one's come in here yet to report to me of heavenly angels visiting them, but anyway, there are three people in this story: Sarah Tiergarten, Art Fielder, and Miriam Cassidy, who have already received some kind of message during the Christmas season. And now the three of them are working together to fix or replace all of the burnt out bulbs that line a dying church in a decaying neighborhood, and it's called Angel Acres. Today we bring you chapter 4. What if the angel had come to the shepherd's bowling night?
3 bulbs to the left.
Art unscrews the designated bulb, drops it in the canvas sack he wears attached to his belt, and inserts the new bulb.
4 bulbs to the left. No, 3.
They had been working on the project for almost 3 weeks. In the middle of the second week, a problem had developed. Originally, approximately 1/3 of the bulbs had been burned out, but those which were still working were old. Every time they turned on the lights to determine which bulbs needed to be replaced, they discovered that additional bulbs had burned out in the sections they had already covered.
Finally, Miriam had suggested that they turn the lights on one more time and make diagrams of the bulbs which needed replacements, then turn out the lights until the job was completed. Then when the lights were finally turned on, at least most of the bulbs would be good. Sarah had agreed and suggested they wait until Christmas Eve so that for one night at least, the church would reflect its former glory.
The bulb right next to it, and that's it.
Art descends the ladder.
I don't know how I can thank you.
Don't thank us yet. It's test time.
I thought we weren't going to turn them on until Christmas Eve.
Yeah, well, I've never spent much time around a church, and I don't have your faith.
What you're saying is you don't trust my diagrams?
You are a creative genius. What we're talking about here is precision.
I got them right.
We'll see. Can't lose too many bulbs in a 5-minute test.
I guess you're right. I'll go in and turn them on.
She enters the church building. In a couple of minutes, the church explodes with light.
Wow!
Yeah, it really does look pretty good. Although there's one out near the top of the left pillar.
You're getting compulsive. There are lights out on the White House Christmas tree.
There's one down there, near the ground. I can at least get there without moving the ladder.
If it'll make you feel good.
Sarah exits the church and comes over to stand with the other two. Art sees that her eyes are beginning to water.
It's just like it was when Max finished it.
She embraces the embarrassed Art.
Do you think we better turn them off?
Yeah.
But before Sarah can move toward the church door, every light outside and inside Angel Acres Community Church goes out.
Uh-oh.
They stand stunned.
Where's the circuit breaker box?
I don't know. Sometimes when this happened, Max would go down and do something in the furnace room.
It's happened before?
Sometimes.
Show me where the furnace room is.
With a flashlight from the glove compartment of Sarah's car, they descend into the depths of the building, along halls lined with the crayon drawings by the church school children, their edges brown and cracked with age.
20 years ago, Bobby Edgerton had depicted pairs of animals ascending a stairway to a boat with 3 smokestacks. The species of the animals are for the most part unidentifiable. They passed Lauren Wallace's impressionistic portrayal of the Jerusalem temple, which looks vaguely like the Angel Acres fire station. One entire wall is a 17-year-old retrospective of the Nativity. Camels often distinguishable from wise men only by their number of legs.
The ancient boiler room has also become a storage room, and they pick their way carefully between piles of hymn books and mildewed pew cushions.
Oh, it's a fuse box.
Is that bad?
Well, most places have circuit breakers. This should be replaced.
He squints at the dusty interior of the box, noting that many of the fuses look new.
Half of the fuses in here are blown. Must have gone before it tripped the main. If there is a main. It may take more fuses to fix this than it took bulbs.
As he says it, he sees the pile of boxes on the small shelf next to the fuse box.
Well, it looks like we've got plenty, and it looks like this must happen a lot. You really ought to get the whole system replaced.
No, let somebody else worry about that.
Yeah.
He is already replacing the blown fuses. It takes him 10 minutes.
Art and Miriam assemble again on the sidewalk in front of the church. There is unspoken agreement that throwing the master switch is Sarah's job. This time, when the lights come on, they last only about 45 seconds. They see the despair on Sarah's face.
You need another trunk, a whole separate power source for the lights.
Can you do that? What would it cost?
No, I don't know what it would cost, but I can't do it. Well, maybe I could do it, but it wouldn't be legal, and I'm just an apprentice. And you have to get a permit and go through all the red tape with the power company.
The three stand in the darkness.
It's Tuesday night.
You have a wonderful sense of time.
Maybe there is something I can do.
Art stands in the raised area between the bar and the video games in the center of the Angel Hills Bowling Alley and Family Recreation Center. Lanes 1 through 22 are on his right, lanes 23 through 44 on his left.
The Electricians Local 417 Bowling League occupies lanes 27 through 38. He can't pick out his uncle among the bowlers. This probably means he's already left town with his family for the holidays. The job they've been working on has shut down for 2 weeks over Christmas. At least Art and his uncle hope it will only be for 2 weeks. No one on the job believes the unpaid vacation is an expression of the contractor's seasonal spirit. Rumors of shaky financing have been circulating since November.
Art knows some of the faces on the bowling teams, but none are his special friends. He sees no one who's been on the same job as he and his uncle. Well, might as well start with 27 and work his way up.
Hey, I'm Art Fielder, Harry Fielder's nephew. I got something I need to talk to you about.
Most of them are sympathetic. They just don't have time. Most are working, some overtime and grateful for it, what with the special Christmas expenses. All have plans for the week before Christmas. Several acknowledge that they are already in trouble with their families for going bowling on the Tuesday before Christmas. A few are actively hostile. Another church wanting something for free.
Art wonders later if it has been some kind of test of his faithfulness. He finds Larry Barlow in one of the teams on the last lane. He could just as easily have started at the end.
Yeah, I'll do it. I don't have anything better to do. We're almost finished. Why don't you and me go over there and show me what you've got?
They work well together, Art thinks. Better than he works with his uncle, who sometimes seems to resent the fact that he might someday be in competition with Art for the available jobs.
You do dope, kid?
No.
I just wondered. That's what I see on TV all the time.
Don't believe everything you see on TV. Just don't worry about it.
Yeah. My wife said not to worry about how my daughter dressed. Said they all dress that way on TV. It was just a phase. Now she's in the third year of a 10-year phase at Langston Correctional Facility for Women.
Your daughter?
Yeah. I don't know where my wife is or much care.
I'm sorry.
You shouldn't be. That's how you got me. What else did I have to do on Christmas?
Sarah Tiergarten enters the room.
The power company says all they can do is try.
You talked to Elsie?
Yes?
You told her it was me that was wanting it?
Yes, she said to say hello. She said the hookup would have to be Thursday morning or not at all. Everybody has the afternoon off.
They've forgotten where it all came from.
Yes. You remember, though.
Yeah, I remember. I just didn't remember soon enough.
What are you people talking about?
Look out the window.
They are on the third floor of the church building. They are bringing in the new trunk line alongside the old one to minimize the need for new holes in the walls and the floor. Art and Miriam follow Larry to the window.
What do you see?
All the Christmas lights?
Angel Acres stands on both sloping sides of a shallow valley. From the window, almost all of the homes are visible, almost all of them outlined in lights.
It started when I was a kid. We were like any other place, Some houses put lights up, maybe a Santa Claus on the roof, or even a plastic lighted Mary and Joseph in the front yard. Then every year the church started showing up with more and more lights. Your husband did that, right?
Yes.
And it just sort of spread. As I remember it, and I was real young at the time, it started with the houses around the church. Sort of like somebody had spilled a can of paint and it spread out from where it spilled. The lights just sort of spread out. Finally, almost everybody in Angel Acres outlined their houses in lights. You're really kind of looked down on in Angel Acres if you don't outline your house in lights. It makes some national magazine every couple of years, but it started here.
I didn't know that.
A lot of people don't know it anymore.
He looks at Art.
It was weird. You come into the bowling alley Tuesday night. See, I was trying to talk myself into coming here already.
Why?
I saw the church was dark. I almost came last year. I saw how many of the lights were burned out. Then this year, there weren't any lights at all, and I thought that was wrong. It all started here, and then this was the only place that didn't have any lights. And I kind of wondered, how long before the rest of the lights go out? There aren't as many as there used to be.
Miriam and Art stand in one window. Sarah has walked up beside Larry at another.
It all started here. All the lights spread out from here. Darkness spreads too.
There is an uncomfortable silence.
Once I was going to be a minister. I wasn't smart enough to make it through college. No, that's not true. I just had too much fun. I met my wife. It didn't seem as important anymore. Electricians make good money, a lot more than ministers if you work most of the year. My wife and I, we had one kid, took her to Sunday school for a while, right here. Maybe she drew one of those pictures down in the basement. They look like they've been there long enough. But she didn't like it, my daughter, fussed all the time. And my wife never was very religious. And we got a boat and spent a lot of time on the lake. Hey, well, we knew right from wrong. We knew what life was all about. We had the idea. Seems like once we all had some kind of an idea, figure now, maybe just having an idea isn't enough.
On Friday morning, the people from the power company arrive and hook up the new trunk line. It is 6 o'clock before all four of them can make it to the church, and there is a general agreement that the lights will not be turned out until all of them are there.
Larry, Art, and Miriam stand on the sidewalk in front of the church. Sarah enters the building and throws the main switch.
Again, the lights blaze into life. Sarah barely has time to return to the front of the building to see this.
After 30 seconds, every light on the church goes out. Within the next 5 seconds, every light in the Angel Acre subdivision goes out.
For weeks now, we've been talking about angels. Angels as messengers of God. And I've essentially suggested that y'all go out there and be like an angel and give the message of good news to somebody that you run into on your doorstep or in the grocery store or on the telephone. Be a messenger of God. Tell somebody some good news. Mine is a very earthly interpretation of angel. But all this talk of angels, this sermon story of Jack's about angels and translating Christmas angels from stories of so long ago into now a time and a place we understand, it begins to beg the question about angels. And so it came up in our Bible study the other night, where we really asked some honest questions. And one of them was, what is an angel? Are we supposed to believe there's a whole society of them up there? which cracked me up because it delivered the truth that I think maybe there might be a society, but I don't know about it. Well, we're a people who are used to history, reading stories with very accurate information about what happened when, who did it. Was it before X or after Y? And we get used to reading stories and wanting that exact kind of detail, and we don't get it when we read the Bible. And instead, we have to interpret it and hone our capacity for interpretation, which is, of course, what we do every day when we read the news anyway, right? Study the Bible long enough, and you'll discover how time-bound we are. And then you stop and you study this question and this passage, and so many questions come up, and you study it long enough, and all of a sudden, eternity is crashing into your calendar. Well, in today's gospel reading, an angel of the Lord visits the shepherds. The shepherds who are keeping watch over their flocks by night. Oh, and you have to remember how much God loves shepherds. From Father Abraham, who was a shepherd, to Moses, who was a shepherd, to King David, who got his start in life as a shepherd, taking care of his father's flocks. Even God is imagined to be a shepherd. The 23rd Psalm, even atheists pick that for scripture at some of their funerals. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. We love that shepherd image, and it carries from the Old Testament into the New Testament when we consider Jesus Christ, too, is the good shepherd. So, shepherds are beloved by God. And an angel of the Lord decides to appear first to the shepherds. Of course. Well, they're outside of Bethlehem, not too far away, minding their own business in the fields. And suddenly, an angel of the Lord bursts in on them. Now, from the reader's point of view, this is the third time that an angel of the Lord has showed up. Remember, the first time is Zechariah tells someone that a son is on the way, and indeed the boy is born. And the second angel is Gabriel, who tells Mary that she's going to have a son, and that boy is now in the manger. And now here comes the angel of the Lord to stand in a field in front of a bunch of shepherds who are watching their flock by night, and they are terrified. And why not? Not only is there an angel of the Lord standing right in front of them, but this angel of the Lord can't help but let the Lord's glory glow. Now, when I say glow, I want you to think about police lights and fire truck lights kind of blinding you. I mean, this guy is glowing. And the shepherds are terrified. But still, the news is good. The angel of the Lord comes bearing good news. A Savior is born, the Messiah, the one that everyone has been waiting for centuries. The Messiah is here. There's a sign. Go check it out, says the angel of the Lord to the shepherds, and you'll know it's real when you see a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger. When you see that sign, you'll know it's real. The holy crashes into the earthly. Once the angel leaves, the astonished shepherds look at each other and they can't help but get up and go to Bethlehem and leave one of the older shepherds to tend their flocks by night, because they want to see with their own eyes what is this sign that this astonishing creature has told me about. And they go, and there's the baby, wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger, just like the angel said. So they were amazed by a glowing angel, and now they're amazed by the truth of the sign. And then they're also amazed, think about it, the Messiah, the one they've all been waiting for, is lying in a feeding trough. The Messiah is born into poverty? It's the lowliest of places to arrive. Why would the Messiah arrive in a feeding trough? And yet, the shepherds could appreciate this, and they began to glow. Not in that unearthly kind of light blinding somebody, but the kind of glow that comes when total relief of anxiety is lifted. The kind of glow that comes when everything that you have been working for comes together. The kind of glow that comes when a burden rolls off your shoulders and you're free at last. That kind of glow. The shepherds had that kind of glow. Sarah Tiergarten is found by Art Fielder and gets the message that life was good and it still can be, even though a lot of things have changed, including her soulmate not sitting next to her at dinner anymore. Miriam Cassidy is found by Harvard University, and she gets the message that she isn't ordinary and should lean into doing the work of being extraordinary. It's hard, but it's not too hard. And Art Fielder figures out his message by himself in his prayer and decides to embrace the role of spear carrier, of being the supporting role in Miriam's extraordinary life, because it can only really be extraordinary when she gets the support that she needs to do the work that God has called her to do. And now, Larry Barlow is found by Art Fielder and tells the message of the power of light spreading out from that source that is a light on the hill. And we can't assume it will always be that way without making sure that we're part of taking care of the source. Because darkness has the power to spread too. Darkness has the power to spread too. And blowing off right from wrong can have dire consequences. I don't know if there's a whole society of angels up there with a schedule of departures about who should leave when to arrive to whom to tell what message. But I do know that messengers come to us all, and only some of them have good news. The kind of good news that's for everyone and endures from age to age. The kind of good news for everyone that makes us all glow with joy. The kind of good news for everyone that points to the holy crashing into the earthly, with royalty arriving in poverty, and eternity crashing into our time. And let all God's people say, Amen. During our Advent season, we have been spending the 4 Sundays of Advent telling a story written by Jack Kurtz. It's an allegory on the visits of the various angels in the Christmas story, and it takes place in a decaying suburb of Angel Acres and the dying church, Angel Acres Community Church. The word angel simply means messenger, and God still sends us messages, although usually today they come through other people rather than heavenly beings. But tonight, let's go back to Angel Acres, chapter 5. How large a multitude of heavenly hosts is enough?
My name is Sarah Tiergarten. My husband Max and I were charter members of the Angel Acres Community Church. We saw it through the golden years, and we've watched it decline. It was Max's idea to outline the church with lights. Max died last spring. A third of the lights on the church were burned out. The church board couldn't find the money for replacement bulbs, and everyone left was either too old to climb a ladder or just didn't care. I bought the replacements with Max's insurance money, but I couldn't climb the ladder.
I'm Art Fielder. My dad used to go to this church, and he said it helped him out a lot, so I came here and met Sarah. I told her that I'd replace the bulbs.
I'm Miriam Cassidy. I'm Art's girlfriend. I got a big scholarship to a college in the fall, and Art thinks we can't stick together because he's an apprentice electrician. I think he kind of made a bargain with God, that if he replaced the bulbs, God would help us stick together. It took us almost 3 weeks to get the bulbs replaced. Then when we turned them on, they all blew the fuses into place. Art said we had to get a new trunk line to carry the load.
I'm Larry Barlow. I was at the Electricians Union bowling night when Art found me and talked me into putting in a new trunk line. Well, he didn't have to talk very hard. See, the church started a tradition in Angel Acres. After they put up their lights, just about everybody in Angel Acres started outlining their houses in lights. And we got sort of famous. Anyhow, I'd seen the church was dark and most of the houses were still lit. That seemed wrong to me. I mean, after all, the church started it.
So Larry and I put in a new trunk on Christmas Eve. We turned on all the lights, and they all went out again. But this time, all of the lights in Angel Acres went out too.
I did it right. I know I did. I know my job, and I did it right. Anyhow, there's just not any way that an overload in one building is going to knock out the lights in the whole town.
The engineers at the Central States Power Company would have been in complete agreement with Larry. It would have been impossible for anything Larry had done to create a blackout in all of Angel Acres. They are not presently thinking about Larry or aware of his existence. They are presently trying to figure out how the blackout can exist at all.
The blackout is strictly limited to an area within the boundaries of Angel Acres. These boundaries are political realities. They bear absolutely no relationship to the reality which has been created by the Central States Power Company. Sections of the power grid overlap the boundaries to the surrounding suburbs.
It would be possible for small sections of Angel Acres to be selectively blacked out. It would be possible for a large area, including Angel Acres, to lose power. It is scientifically impossible for Angel Acres to have a total blackout, extending only to its geographic boundaries. Nonetheless, it has happened.
I didn't do it. There's no way I could have done it.
It's a coincidence.
Maybe God didn't want it to happen, didn't want us to light the church. Maybe I need to just accept some things. Max is dead, the church is dead. There won't be any more lights.
That's silly, it's wrong. God would want us to have hope.
But some things are impossible. Does God want us to hope for the impossible?
Good question. Miriam, does he?
Not now, Art. Miss Tiergarten, Are there any candles in the church? There are always candles in a church.
Yes, some. Some left over from when we used to have Christmas Eve services. Maybe some from weddings.
We started out to do something. Maybe if it isn't going to turn out quite the way we thought, but we aren't going to quit.
That's why she gets scholarships.
They get the flashlights, one from Sarah's car, 2 from Larry's truck. By the time they had scoured the closets and the storage rooms, they were amazed. Almost 200 candles are lying on the front steps of the church. Some never used, some only 2-inch stubs. Together they began to line the steps of the church, embedding each candle in melted wax.
We don't light them until they're all in place. Some of them aren't going to last very long.
And then they are in place and lighted, and a soft glow illuminates the area in front of the church, partway up the pillars. The spire is still lost in the darkness.
Across the street from the church, Lenny Riker, frustrated primarily at the loss of his television picture, sees the glow, rummages through his own closets, and comes up with 12 candles.
3 doors down, Mariel Simmons, wondering if any of her children will call her for Christmas, inspired by her neighbors, finds 9 candles on her doorstep.
George and Eileen Magsari, slightly off-center members of a survivalist cult, line their sidewalk with 16 flashlights from their end-of-the-world supply closet.
And moving out from the church, Angel Acres gradually resolves to defy the darkness. Candles, flashlights, battery-powered reading lights appear on front steps and porches.
Susan Cartwright, still brooding over her belief that she could have kept her boyfriend if she had lost 20 pounds, contributes the emergency flares from the trunk of her car.
Brandy Ellington, not at all sure that she wants to keep her present boyfriend, performs the largely symbolic gesture of planting and lighting 20 incense sticks in her front yard. If she looks very closely from her front porch, she can barely make out the glowing ends.
By 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve, Angel Acres' defiance of the darkness has reached its modest peak, and then the rain comes, a cold, numbing drizzle. Candles gutter out, flashlights bulbs dim. By 11 o'clock, all is in darkness again, except for the moving headlights and flashlights of the power company crews trying to find something to fix.
At 11:45, the rain turns to snow. 1 minute after midnight, every light on the Angel Acres Community Church blazes into life.
Holy, I'll be darned.
Oh my.
They have spent the rainy part of the evening in Sarah's monstrous old Buick, talking quietly and listening to carols on the radio until Larry warned them that the battery would be completely discharged. And then they continued talking.
Now they stand in front of the church, and it's only the church. No other light in Angel Acres offends the darkness.
The people do not all come. Again, those closest to the church see it first, and those still awake at midnight, but for some reason this seems to be a rather large number. Some knock on doors, some phone their friends, aware that at this time of the morning they may be jeopardizing their friendship. But what if they didn't tell them? Some wake their children.
For some reason, they do not take their cars. They walk, as has been traditional with pilgrims. They stream through the dark streets to the brilliant beacon.
Sarah, the angel, the one that you said used to be on the front of the church and rotted, you got it fixed.
No, I didn't. I thought maybe you did.
They gather around the church. Someone starts a Christmas carol, but it soon dies out. They simply stand. After a time, they begin to drift away. The first 4 are also the last. Then, having nothing more to say to each other, they too leave for their homes.
At 6 o'clock in the morning, power is restored to Angel Acres.
3 days later, the Central States Power Company calls a press conference and provides a logical explanation to the reporters assembled.
There's something about watching light spread that is wonderful. In our light saturated suburban lives, we don't often experience total darkness. That is, unless a generator goes out and power goes out because a squirrel's eaten through something. During the years when it's safe for us to gather as a congregation, as a people in our sanctuary, I think your favorite part of the Christmas Eve service and mine, in addition to the music, is that point at the end of the service when all of the lights are dimmed, and then I take a candle from the light of the Christ candle of the Advent wreath, and then I go to each section of the sanctuary, and one by one we spread the light until we're all in that large room feeling so cozy because of the kind of light that only candles can cast in a space. And there we are singing Silent Night, and there is something heavenly about it. Unparalleled, the whole room glowing. Is it supernatural? Well, this year, I'm going to say yes, because I no longer take for granted that a group of people can engage in an act of the common good together and cooperate and create such a mood, such an ambiance, such a good feeling. And yet there we are creating it. And I hope this night that you will remember that feeling because it is in you. And while we can't have it directly this year, there are memories of it that will make you glow this night. Jack Kurtz liked to talk about Christmas stories falling into two categories, naturalized and supernaturalized. Stories that follow the laws of nature, than the stories that somehow violate the laws of nature. Christmas is about the incarnation, about the divine entering the human realm. Human beings, human communities, about love entering the world in unquenchable ways. He writes, in naturalized Christmas stories, we focus on the human and attempt to see how Christmas is lived out in love. In supernaturalized stories, we're reminded that the mundane world that we know is not all there is not the most important part of reality. Jack originally intended to write naturalized Christmas story where the community effort pushes back the darkness in whatever way they could. But when he finished the first draft, or whatever draft it was, he knew that God wasn't finished writing the story yet. And so he decided to write a supernaturalized story in Angel Acres. For all the work that goes into making Christmas special, especially this year, as so many have started decorating their homes long before Thanksgiving was even on the calendar, looking for some comfort and joy in this strange pandemic. And with stores being sold out of Christmas lights and Christmas trees, Jack wanted the Christmas season to be received as a gift. He wants the Christmas season to be received as a gift. And so he went for the supernaturalized story. He wanted Christmas to come as a gift, not as work, as something from nothing that any of us can do. When all the lights go out, when family and friends aren't everything we'd like them to be, when cancer kills or a pandemic strikes, when everything is going wrong, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, those are the best Christmases of all. It's when, in our personal darkness, that we finally notice that other light. Sometimes it's only when our faith in this life is shaken that we can recognize there's a better place to focus our faith. So yes, the shepherds were amazed by the multitude of angels. And the multitude of angels, even when their glow is so terrifyingly bright, is not the point of the story. It wasn't then, it never has been, and it never will be. Angels are messengers. Their message points to where the miracle is really happening, somewhere else. And the church is a messenger too. And we also hope to be pointing to where miracles are in your life, because you've come here to learn how to see in a new way, how to hear something you hadn't heard before, how to see a bigger reality than is what directly is in front of your eyes. Our faith community is meant to help every one of us, whoever we are and wherever we are on this strange journey of faith, but it is a journey of love and a place to find our way to God, the only place where we'll be truly at home, and along the way, to give and receive messages of love. Merry Christmas.